Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jenny, Head of Communications here at Data.World, and I'm so glad you're here. Now, before we dive in, let's quickly spin through some housekeeping. You're probably already familiar with most of this, so I'll go quickly. First off, this is a pre-recorded broadcast. That means you'll be able to enjoy a presentation that's free from technical difficulties or unexpected interruptions. And it also means you'll be able to chat with our speakers throughout the broadcast. They're both logged in, live, and eager to hear from you. Just reach out using the QA and chat buttons on your screen, and let's keep this lively. Feel free to share your own perspectives, beliefs, questions, anything. Also, this webinar will be available for on-demand replay in about 24 hours. You'll receive an email with the link just in case you missed any of this or want to share with your colleagues. We also have some excellent resources available for you to check out in the console below. You'll see research published by today's presenters, case studies from enterprises just like yours, and, of note, the recently published Forrester Wave for Machine Learning Data Catalogs. We made our debut in that wave this year and are incredibly proud to have received the top score for our current offering. We are thrilled to be joined by the Wave's author today. Michelle Getz is a VP and Principal Analyst serving enterprise architecture professionals at Forrester Research. Her specialty lies in helping data and analytics leaders navigate the complexities of data while running an insight-driven business. Her research also covers artificial intelligence technologies and consultancies, semantic technology, data management strategy, data governance, and data integration. In addition to all this, she has also long promoted a more flexible, collaborative, and agile approach to data ops and governance. Today, you'll hear her recommendations and specific steps your business can take. You'll also hear from John Loyens, CPO and co-founder here at Data.World. Our product and philosophy have always centered on connecting more data, people, processes, and expertise in the enterprise, helping power data-informed decisions at the speed of the business no matter what your skill set. John will introduce a uniquely inclusive, adaptive approach to data governance that focuses on enablement rather than exclusion. And again, both Michelle and John are here to answer any questions in the Q&A and chat. You may all be muted, but we'd still love to hear from you. Share your own perceptions, questions, insights, anything, whatever you'd like to contribute to the conversation. And with that, thank you for joining us for a bit here today. We're glad to see you, and we hope you find this next hour interesting and inspiring.
We all know that data is really important to our organization, and some of the, changes and trends is federation. Everybody's got to get their hands on the data. Everybody's got to work with the data. Everybody wants to make decisions with their data. But silos are starting to creep up, and these silos are really killing your data. We can see that through the data itself. We see that through people, through process, decisions. And some of the things that are kind of popping up is because there's limited reuse and lots of rework. Every time you prepare a data set, you use it, and then you're going back and you're doing something different. And you're like, well, I'll start from scratch again. Where is the data? And it's not just that you need to go to certified systems or managed systems where that data exists. We typically know where all of that is, but there's been a lot of data set creation. There's been a lot of rework, and other sources are popping up that are being sort of launch points to the types of insight that we want to have, but we don't know where they are because we don't know who owns them. We don't know where to find them. And then what data should you use? Should I trust the data from my database in my warehouse and my cloud environments, or should I trust it from Sally because she's done some great work and it's more representative? And so that's difficult now for disseminating the quality. What do you trust? And maybe different sources have different quality. And when do you use what, which data source for what? root cause analysis becomes incredibly difficult here because you don't always know the assumptions that go into why different types of data sources were used. And obviously, that drives that inconsistency. Who hasn't been in a meeting with the executives and the leadership in your company, and you're talking about the same sales metric and it looks different, and everyone's like, why is that different? Yes, that still happens even when we've invested in these modern data warehouses. And ultimately, we are actually more policy driven today in the way that we have to use the data. So areas like security and data protection come up as key challenges because we need to understand identities to support privacy and preferences. And so all of these things are spinning around in a federated environment where it works for the data user of one, but it isn't necessarily working for the entire organization. What does that mean? You've got an agile data problem. We need to bring data in as part of how we work, but in a much more disciplined fashion. So we want to go agile with our data. I'm going to talk about what it means, why you must do it, how to do it, and we'll talk about ways to accelerate this. So let's start with what it means. What it means is when you go agile, it's about making data work for your business process and insight alignment. You're not struggling with your data all the time. It just is what it is. Well, that sounds like nirvana, but there are ways to kind of go about doing this. So when we talk about agile data, it's the ability to easily, quickly, and elastically acquire, interpret, and convert data into value as business needs and market changes. Because really, what we're balancing is the personalized needs of information, not only for the individuals within the organization and for those decision makers, but also taking into account that our data is spreading out beyond the walls of our organization and it's being edited and manipulated just by the way the world works. So that's what we want to really kind of address in this scenario. The number one way to really kind of bring this world together and think about what agile data is about, it's really this balance between not just the analytics that we do with our data, but how data is linked within the operations itself. So we really have to see this as a holistic ecosystem. You don't have analytics unless you can capture and manage data within your business processes, engagements with customers, or even with your engagements with your partners. I mean, all of that is exhaust for your analytics. But analytics is also data input into your operational systems so that you understand what to do, what decisions to make. They could be tactical decisions and with a lot of automation. They could be decisions about how do I process a claim today? Or they could be for strategic decisions to see how is my business running. So really kind of connecting the dots between the world of operations and the world of what you want to know to make decisions is really important. So context, completeness, accuracy, timeliness, and consistency is all coming from rationalizing against operations. But you have to think dissemination for your analytics. And how does that flow in? And how do you reorganize that data for a different environment? And then vice versa. So this is really the key. Why do you do this? Well, we talked about the fact like the world is changing. 2020 has been such a wonderful year to live in. Everything's thrown at us, and our data needs to help be more representative of what's going on so that we can be more responsive to change. Now, this is not necessarily a new concept. We've been living in disruption for quite some time. So, for those of us who lived in the late 90s and 2000s working with data, that Y2K period, that was a lot of change as we see, the internet giants and the tech giants coming up. They're redesigning the way that we work, the way that we go about our business. Everything is based off of a technology platform. And that really has us to change our mindset to be agile with the people, process, technology, and decisions. So from a data perspective, we are seeing that more than half of organizations are using an agile development methodology and process to go about this. Why do they do that? Well, you can trust things better. You have higher quality capabilities delivered to end users. You're not having to go back and rework everything, and you're in tune with what your end users need. So you're able to push tests in ahead of time as you're unit testing your data. And then you're also able to constrain it by behavioral tests and behavioral test development and incorporate that. You can go much faster because you're scoping tighter and you're being more specific about what you want your data to do. You have improved visibility into the business needs and the results of these capabilities, because what you're doing is you're creating that alignment that we talked about earlier of data to analytics and operations and how data flows through that. The resources and budget come more naturally because there's a reason behind it. It's not just to lower the cost of total ownership of your data centers. It's about how do I also get return on investment for the value of my data, which is more closely linked to what those business needs are. And then lastly, it's the oversight and management that really comes into play, because data management and development and governance doesn't sit to the side of the organization. It starts to become embedded within the organization. But we do have to recognize that we have some room to grow. A lot of our capabilities have been designed today around democratizing analytics, creating those citizen analysts, as you hear say. There's also this notion of the citizen data scientist. So a lot of machine learning and AI capabilities are starting to come up. This mindfulness around insights to decisions is really important. But we are sometimes forgetting about the fact, where does this data come from? And where it comes from indicates what its value is and what it means. And so really what we want to think about from an agile data perspective is using our data operations teams, resources, capabilities to bring that through, not just from the big data, BI, data integration, AI types of capabilities, that analytic context, but really focusing back down on what's going on in our real-time systems and how are we managing through engagement and automation. And so if you're doing this right, there's much more of a balance in terms of where you're applying your agile capabilities. And that's really where your marker is, to understand that you're going to be more effective, but also that you're going to be more balanced and mature around the way that you use your data. So we talk about it at Forrester around agile data is the vaccine to chaos. This is really where we're going to say 2020, go home, 2021 is going to be a better place for us. And we see really examples of how agile data drives resilience, elasticity, innovation, and growth. With our governments taking advantage of collecting a massive amount of information around the countries and communities and our citizens to really see what is the health of our citizens today in things like COVID. But that's, they're also using that for other types of diseases like cancer or flu. And so all of this information allows countries, and particularly in Germany, to take things like mobile apps and inputs from healthcare companies and to determine how do you tighten and relax different types of social constructs and economic constructs so that you can still move forward in your daily lives, but de-risk yourself from diseases. If you look at Amazon, they've been, really interesting in the way that they have kind of taken a look at their ecosystem. They're about elasticity. They have all of this data amassed. They've tightened their operations and their analytics function so that as things began to radically change, they noticed it in the buying purchases and the behaviors of vendors as COVID-19 started to emerge. And so what were they able to do? Quickly take all of this and redesign their ecosystem, the commerce engines, and the supply chains to really match different types of functions so that, and they did this really, really quickly. They did this in a matter of days and finished it up in an iterative fashion within a number of weeks, where other commerce environments took several months before they were really able to tune their e-commerce systems to this new reality that we live in, where there's a high demand of purchasing done. Dyson did something interesting on the innovation side. We don't think about, product developers as, great on data, but what they were able to do is have a strong information management capability that maintained all of this information around their designs, around their testing, around the versioning of the different types of products that they have, from vacuums to light to dryers. And now what they can do is take that and say, there are very specific elements here that can help solve the challenge of not enough ventilators in the market. Now, why is that kind of important? Because if you turn towards medical device companies, they were saying it takes anywhere from 8 to 15 months to develop, to kind of bring to market the number of ventilators that were going to be needed. But Dyson was able to do this in a tenth of the time, just a matter of a few weeks. And what that's allowed them to do is, because the data gave them that understanding of how to sort of refactor their IP into something that was needed quickly. And then lastly, take a look at, we talk about big companies and things around, what was happening with COVID, but look at a small business on Main Street. This is one of my favorite restaurants, the Depot Street Tavern. So let's give them a little bit of plug right here in Massachusetts. But what's really fascinating here is, as much as they're sort of this, Main Street business where everybody goes to enjoy a meal and a beer, they platformed their business on a strong software capability. And so when it was time to shift, as things were changing, they were able to go back to their software partner and say, how can we extend the way that we're using this environment, understanding the behaviors of our customer, and really align the way that we can sell our food and recipes and other types of items that we have, so that people can still stay in touch with us and eventually, come back to us in a regular scenario. And so taking care of packaged restaurant platforms to do that. So how do we do this? It's really time for data ops. I talked about that, at the beginning, that this is one of the secret sauces that comes in. Well, let's put this into context. What do we mean when we're talking about data ops? It's really the ability to enable solutions, develop data products, and activate data for business value across all technology tiers and infrastructure, from infrastructure to experience. What do we mean infrastructure to experience? It's really from that technology foundation and capability to how do we get that value? How do we experience? What is our expectations of the data so that we can meet our responsibilities in our job and create great value and experiences for our customer? This expertise goes way beyond databases and integration. As we talk about analytics and operations coming together, you need to understand data to process orchestration. You need to understand how to be policy driven and embed those policies in. You need to be thinking about the variety of data models that's going to emerge to meet different nomenclature standards and categorizations that happen in your business. And obviously you need those security and privacy controls, really incorporating that control plane into the environment. So what happens is data ops incorporates way more engineering capability than what our typical data management capability was. So we're looking at, core enablement around experiences, automation, and that intelligence from AI. But the development capabilities really is much more around a typical continuous integration and continuous development strategy around develop, deploy, orchestrate, and evaluate, and then bringing that back in. The delivery itself, you're minimizing the technology. And really understanding what is the right capability for the right tools, and understanding both the capabilities and the architecture that it's balanced on to know how does that satisfy your data needs today, but where does that give you launch pads and a flywheel for tomorrow, because nothing is static. This is that elasticity that you're looking for in your platform. Governance has been a dirty word of late. Nobody wants bureaucracy, and so you push it over to the side. But in data ops and embracing agile data and agile data capabilities, what you're thinking about is not just the traditional things around how do you govern data through business policies, but incorporating what are the data policies? How do you look at solution quality? How do you look at code quality? And how do you drive that production administration so you can watch what's happening with the data in context of machine learning being deployed, of applications running, or the insights and intelligence that's happening with your BI and analytics capabilities. So it's all really tightly embedded together so that data doesn't sit on the side of your business, or governance doesn't sit on the side, it's within. And so really what data ops is doing is it's mastering this federation orchestration by having the widespread capabilities and intelligence that lets you understand the location that data is coming from, the various sources that it exists in and it moves through, how people are engaging, how they're doing that with, within the confines or enablers of regulation, and certainly still taking into account what the platform provides in terms of compute being more efficient, not having downtime, which ensures the quality of information and the security capabilities. And all of it is defined within delivery in that iterative process to continuously improve and advance on what the data is bringing, but also the data systems are bringing to your organization. You can't do this in the silo. So all of you data people, get out of your data cubicles and your data offices, get on your Zoom meetings and start to collaborate on the development of these new capabilities. Really bring in your business leads, your designers, your solutions teams to really think about what is it that the ultimate deliverable is going to be and what is data's role going to play within there. This is a new approach on the design thinking construct where the data teams are intimately involved because you are the experts on where data can be found and how to instrument that data up so that you can test this out with some of the new ideas that are coming together. It also ensures that you're more balanced in your collaboration with the data science teams. You're not just throwing data over the wall into their data science clusters, but you're incorporating strategic sourcing and curation to help inform what will support what the data science teams are doing. And in fact, when you move forward, as much as there is activity that happens in the feature engineering, data engineers are now responsible for picking up the ownership and management of those features as other key data elements that need to come under management so that analytics can move forward appropriately, and ultimately migrating into the core of the DevOps functionality where developers, data engineers, and machine learning engineers come together to bring these solutions to life and move forward more progressively. You're thinking about the roadmap for value. You're thinking about what are the types of products that are delivered in terms of sources and views and models and APIs. You're thinking about transparency and traceability, so that quality component. And you're always thinking about that CI/CD cycle because it's never a one done walk away. You're always evolving it. And so from a roadmap, what you're thinking about is, different lanes in terms of how fast your information is going to come through, how quickly you need to make decisions, and where you can start to architect. So we live a lot on our BI side and have architected our data for BI significantly, but we do want to have a little bit of time travel built in. So how do you take what you've done from a BI perspective and overlay and augment that information so you can be more predictive, so that you do understand and interpret behaviors. But this gets you into a little bit of a challenge because everything's moving quickly and we live in the now. So, how do we start incorporating more and overlaying more of the operational data to digital twin our business? And then ultimately to give us that vast elasticity, resilience, innovation, and speed or growth, we have the cognitive components, that AI capability. And so you're overlaying your data capabilities like that. So it's not that you walk away from each one of these streams, but you can see how one builds upon the other and back informs even in terms of what you want to look at for performance. How do you accelerate? You accelerate with something at the core. How do you bring data operations all together? How do you see the world of data? And this is really where machine learning data catalogs make agile data possible. So the data catalogs are really focused on some key things. It's about bringing the metadata together, the physical, logical, contextual, semantic, as well as the machine learning metadata together. You have to think of all the sources of your data, not just the database. Where does it live? How is it being utilized? And we have a lot of IoT and edge use cases. So we're bringing that into the component as well. And we want the catalog to see all this and represent the data appropriately. You want intelligence on this information, not just what the data is. Where is it coming from? Does it have any biases? There's a lot of effort right now within machine learning to identify bias in the data even before it comes into the hands of the data scientists, so that you're identifying those issues ahead of time and anomalies ahead of time that will affect the outputs of the model. So rather than seeing problems at the end, you're catching those things at the beginning. You want usability, obviously. So how do you make it so that you can work with the data quickly, but still governed? Right subject matter expert for the right task, nomenclature, bringing the information together so that you have consistency and policies, definitions, business rules, expression to the way that your business runs, operates, and thinks about this information. And then lastly, having an environment for development that is tightening all these things together so that you can move quickly on not just building something, but how do you version it? How do you transform? How do you test? How do you look for errors and resolve those errors? Where is the location? What type of code is being used? And how is that being all brought together with data science and other types of solution capabilities? And where is that reference and enablement capability to make that all possible so that you can be highly coordinated and orchestrated both in your capabilities for data as well as your collaboration that we talked about with the entire teams and stakeholders that care about this. So really what it's all about is intelligence drives everything. Think about the fact that you are turning to that data catalog to provide you the insights and the enablement to make agile data possible. It all begins with the fact that you need something smart inside. You need a machine learning capability to help you sort through this, find the signals and the noise. This is just another way to get to your data, to rationalize it, to identify it, to name it, and also to be able to be policy driven and applying the right policies at the right time and orchestrating that appropriately for the use cases that data is being delivered in. And what you see with this is that data ops really starts to become an environment as a composable data hub, because you can really understand how search is happening on information, how queries are being driven, and how solutions are expecting the data to be. That is all inputs into the way that you're going to tag the information, categorize it, classify it, and recognize those policies. You're going to be able to use machine learning to see more than just structured data. You can start to look at content itself and bring those two worlds together. And then data governance becomes not just an action of command and control, but also lends itself to the training of the information, because the machine learning is recognizing how you're managing it and using it to keep your data up to date and surface those things that appear to be behavioral anomalies to the data in order to adjust and refactor that. So hopefully I've given you the, answers to the 4 questions that we talked about, which is, let's start by making data work for our business. Let's make sure we're thinking about data in the context of resilience, elasticity, innovation, and growth for our organization, tying data ops in as the best practice to bring agile data and agile data practices to light. And then ultimately, where is the enablement going to come out so that data ops and governance and value exists within the organization? So thank you very much. And right now, I'd like to hand it over to John to talk more about the cataloging capabilities.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation there, Michelle. I mean, that was great. I think, some of the things that you were presenting about that really got me thinking about how we're going to talk next about agile data governance. One of the real interesting things I saw in your presentation was this idea that only, like, at best, as it relates to your data infrastructure and IT, at best, you're applying agile principles to 50% of your initiatives, right? Like on, say, big data, all the way down to like 20%. And that really is striking to me if you think about the history of technology, the history of the software development lifecycle, and how the adoption of agile principles really unlocked a lot of ROI there. That's one thing that really stuck out to me, that we're seeing such a limited amount of agile adoption in this realm where it's been so successful in the software development lifecycle. I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add there, any color that maybe you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the struggles is, again, going back to where has the data management or data ops really been focused, and it's standing up big monolithic systems. We don't live with monolithic systems anymore. And yet we still approach our new platforms that way. So really the takeaway is, rather than just building the monolithic systems, is scoping smaller and adding data capabilities that grow over time. You don't need a field of dreams by migrating everything to the cloud and then immediately flicking a switch. It's going to take 12 to 18 months before adoption happens, and you've been paying for cloud services all of that time. Versus if you can spin up a cluster and get a data scientist running on that cluster immediately, well, now you started to bring together a work stream and a data stream and a value stream that begins a starting point much faster in a matter of weeks. You can extend that cluster for other types of activities that analytics will support, because you can take what the data scientist is doing and start thinking about, well, what's the BI that I need on top of it? So augmenting the data that way, and then maybe doing some more simple predictive analytics so that you're augmenting that for your digital twins.
Yeah, that also, a little later on in your presentation, you mentioned composability being a new kind of key capability. And that's another area where I've seen a lot of parallels recently with how, like, Agile DevOps has really impacted how we develop and deploy software, with how we want to go in the data analytics space, where, these best of breed open ecosystem-based things where you plug and play really help you achieve ROI and let you add capability, rather than having to think of things as a monolith and want to do things top down. Really helps you think about, like, okay, maybe I can hold off on maybe the data quality tooling or this tooling because I've got this problem instead, and I'm going to pick and choose the best of breed and be assured that I can plug in simply and easily. Rather than, like, I got to buy everything from one specific vendor. Is that something that you're seeing out there as well? People wanting to do that?
Yeah, you're starting to see more and more conversations about what is a data product and how do you scope a data product? Because that way, if you're going to develop a pipeline, it's not that you're just developing a pipeline, you're then instrumenting that into a microservice or an API, or it's part of a container, and that's what gets delivered. And that has a value representation and a quality representation. And so that's definitely emerging as a way to think about things. but that's really where the cataloging capability, comes into play, because you're developing more stuff and like, filling up, not just shoe boxes, but, like little micro centers of databases. And so how do you sort through all of that? So there's a benefit of composability, but there's a discipline around composability that's necessary. And that's honestly where a lot of the struggle comes in.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about, Michelle. And I think with that, I'm going to jump into my presentation on Agile data governance. I think you've given us a lot to think about. Actually, one of the things you gave us to think about in your presentation was talking about how we want to involve, you called it infrastructure and experience, bridge infrastructure to experience. And that's an area where I think that Agile data governance can really, really help us, and that really is a big part of the topic of my presentation as well. So I'm going to just start on sharing my screen here. Hopefully everybody can see the intro to my presentation. I am John Lyons. I'm the co-founder and chief product officer at Data.World. This wonderful shot of me is pre-pandemic hair. You've got both versions of me now. But what I wanted to talk to you a little bit today, and extending and adding to the things that Michelle talked about, was how data governance, as in its traditional sense, as a top-down command and control methodology, is really something that is slowing down your business and really killing your ability to innovate and go agile in your data analytics. And really, it's time to think about that, and it's time to fix that. Some to think about how data governance can be an enabler rather than something that is primarily focused on risk and compliance. And by making it an enabler, by using it as something to bring people together, to add inclusiveness and transparency to the process of data analytics, we can really unlock our entire data supply chain and enable a concept like Agile data ops as well. Now, one thing I want to start off with here is talking about and asking all of you, what creates a data-driven culture? Not what is a data-driven culture, but what creates a data-driven culture? And you'll see every vendor in the space claiming to be the silver bullet that will finally unlock your data-driven culture for you. Well, I'm here to tell you that no one vendor can do that. No one tool or technology will be the thing that magically creates a data-driven culture for you. One of the key tenets of Agile, in fact, is that there are no silver bullets. And I think what can be confusing in this space is everybody sharing so much of the same language around being able to create a data-driven culture for you. Only you can create a data-driven culture, and data-driven cultures are created when you bring process, people, and technology together and make smart decisions about them. To help you make smarter decisions about how you bring process, people, and technology together, let's walk through what a typical data culture maturity model looks like. This is something that we've seen with a lot of our prospects, a lot of our clients. And honestly, it's what myself and our CTO lived through at our prior company as we were competing head to head with a very tough competitor in the market. We were trying to bring more data-driven products to market, and we were struggling. And we were struggling a lot really in this first phase where we were building out a lot of infrastructure, adding tools, and really buying into that silver bullet mentality that if we just build the next great data warehouse, add that data science team, add that data science tooling, that we will create the data-driven culture that we see our competition having. Now, we worked at a company called HomeAway, one of the biggest vacation rental marketplaces out there, and we were getting our butts kicked, frankly, by Airbnb. We wanted to be data-driven like they were, and we were constantly asking ourselves why. One of the primary areas that we saw them innovating around was this idea of visibility of their data, making it a little bit more democratized across their entire organization. But a lot of our prospects, clients, customers, and partners get stuck at this phase. As they go to institute governance, cataloging, business glossary initiatives, instead of unlocking things, they're actually putting up gates in front of people. And it's really at that next layer, right? Once you start thinking about access, adding a meaningful semantic layer, and then finally truly democratizing your data, adding reuse and reproducibility to your data analytics ecosystem, that you hit the promised land where these market dominant players like Netflix, Amazon, and Airbnb compete. I also include Capital One in this kind of reference list mainly because I want to show people that, it doesn't, a financial services industry, a financial services stalwart can also compete in this space and become agile and apply agile data governance as well, right? Now, a lot of where people get hung up is by applying these traditional models of enterprise information management to their data analytics ecosystem. You start by looking at data governance as a top-down, risk and compliance-oriented activity to define, enforce, audit, control your data structures, and data management being a primarily IT-driven industry, like Michelle said, bringing up a lot of that, data infrastructure as a monolith, right? As you start to operationalize that, you'll see people start to form things like governance councils, right? And your IT and data ops teams being very engineering and DBA focused, maybe with an architect trying to bridge this gap before it finally gets down, rolls all the way downhill to your data consumer community, ultimately creating this Oliver Twist-like mentality of hey, please, sir, may I have another, right? And that ultimately, this ivory tower approach ultimately leads to your business acceleration and value that you expect to get out of your data analytics ecosystem not being achieved. The things that it creates data bread lines where, you're asking, please, sir, may I have another mentality where you have to go to the gatekeepers in the ivory tower before you can get access, right? When you finally get access, you're stuck asking questions about what the meaning of the data you just received is. When you finally build that understanding as a data consumer, that ultimately creates a silo because you're going to hold on to that understanding like your life depends on it, right? And you end up with rogue databases or Excel sheets, where you're making critical business decisions around being stuck on one person's desk. Ultimately, this leads to data brawls, right? Where everybody gets that meeting where you want to make a business decision based on this, but this brawl occurs where you're like, well, my number's right. No, my number's right. Well, we end up making an opinion-based decision in that realm because we have been working in a transparent and open and inclusive environment. And finally, data literacy crops up. Nobody wants to work like this, where it takes months to get access, where you have to ask questions, and you just don't bother learning the fundamentals of good data-driven decision-making in this environment. I have to get credit where credit's due. This idea of the data supply chain being broken comes directly from Thomas Tunguz's book, Winning with Data, I think, which gives one of the best illustrations of the business problems associated with building a solid agile-based data supply chain out there. Really encourage all of you to look at that. And I want to encourage all of us to take a different approach to things, where it's one where we all work together to realize the value and achieve the ROI of all this massive value and ROI, like massive value that we're driving into our data analytics systems, right? What if, in a traditional barn raising, instead of everybody coming together with a common understanding of the result we want to achieve, we just handed out lists of rules immediately. Don't hit your thumb with a hammer. Don't use the rusty nails. You might get tetanus. We would never get a barn raised, yet in these traditional communities where we do barn raising, we see incredible structures being built in very limited amounts of time. Sometimes, over the course of a single weekend, we build these amazing structures that stand, and some of whom, have stood for hundreds of years. I also think about the rules of the road, the things that govern, our modern interstate system or the modern highway systems you see even internationally. These rules are simple. They're consistent. And yeah, there could be details different down at the individual municipality and law level, but overall, we have a common language that we use when we get into a car. We all agree to signal. We all agree to put on our seatbelts. We all agree to use our brakes when the stop sign goes red. And by doing that, we have enabled such an incredible modern ecosystem for commerce along our roads by having a simple set of rules that are easy to apply and that everyone can participate in. So I encourage us to actually redefine what data governance is, and redefine it along the lines of, let's ask ourselves what data governance is. Is it risk avoidance and compliance? Really, I think it should be about the rules of cooperation and collaboration in your data analytics ecosystem. And if we extend that definition, maybe data governance should be the process of doing data analytics work together. And then when we talk about agile data governance, let's think about this, right? Maybe agile data governance should be the thing that, introduces inclusiveness and transparency to our data analytics work and adapts these deeply proven best practices from agile and open software development to data analytics, right? When Eric Raymond wrote his seminal book, The Cathedral and the Bazaar, and the idea of letting a million blossoms flower to discover the best software to create the highest quality software, this is what we need to apply to our data analytics space, right? When the writers and the framers of the Agile Software Development Manifesto created their 4 simple principles of Agile software development, I think we can apply these to data analytics as well. Looking very much at, particularly having individual interactions over processes and tools, focusing on working insights over comprehensive documentation, right? Focusing on data consumer collaboration when we're creating our data resources, right? And then being able to respond to change in the marketplace, very similar to what Michelle talked about. And if you think about it in these ways, you can really start to unlock your data supply chain, realizing that culture is the key to really getting value out of your data, right? From a top-down perspective, CDOs out there, you need to think about how do we do this? How do we do this? And how do we champion a data-driven culture from the top down? Well, encouraging this bottoms-up participation, right? And to encourage that bottoms-up participation, governance is going to be what separates you from the pack. Is this going to be a thing where you apply command and control principles, or is it going to be the thing that brings people together in an inclusive way to collaborate? And finally, making smart technology decisions to enable agile data ops to really take the friction out of this environment, the friction out of working together and being agile around your data analytics practice. We need to switch from defense to offense here. This is where a lot of organizations have a big gap and where a lot of these legacy top-down processes are failing, right? If instead we think about this top-down process, if instead we're thinking about our governance and democratization processes and adding data literacy in to become a data-driven org, putting people and analyses in addition to the data and analytics ecosystem together and looking at the intersection of those, we can really unlock our data-driven culture. And this is our opportunity to do it right. When we introduce agile data governance and agile practices into our data analytics ecosystem, we want to think about bridging the data and knowledge gap, the gap between our data producers and our data consumers, right? Where we actually think a lot about adding a third role in here. By bridging this gap, by adding a data product manager, somebody facilitate these agile processes where you start by curating assets together, you audit their usage, you govern their usage, you document it as well to kind of slowly bridge this gap between the producers and consumers and create a collaborative ecosystem. This is really our opportunity to do this right and to bridge this gap. So what does a process look like here, right? The first thing that we have to do is we have to choose the team right. We have to bring our producers and our consumers together. We have to operate flexibly as one team to create a dynamic working environment where everybody actually works together, right? We like to encourage people to start with a simple problem, to identify questions and develop a data analytics backlog that is product oriented, that prioritizes the data analytics questions that you want to answer and can do it in a generic way that drives adoption of your data analytics ecosystem, with business value ultimately being the driver. The next phase is you want to start curating those assets together, right? Where these producers and consumers are collaborating together on one or two business problems to create a data asset that's actually reusable and capturing that knowledge as it's done, so that the knowledge capture isn't a post hoc process that feels like a chore. You're doing it early and often and in the flow of doing work. That will really truly enable the downstream consumers to reuse these assets, right? It will also enable your data producers to create a practice of evangelism and community and accessibility and hands-on work around these assets so they can continually get the feedback they need through measurement and audit, right? Really, ultimately, what we're going for here is fast and safe enablement of these end users so we can collect knowledge and create this feedback loop in a really meaningful, fluid way that feels natural to the work process rather than as something that is dictated, from the top down. If we do this, we're going to have a massive, impact on our ability to achieve ROI. Now, a traditional data governance model would have you doing each of these phases in a very top-down way, making sure that they're perfect for your organization. Instead, by taking this backlog and use case-driven approach, you go through a whole cycle and deliver business value one at a time, letting the best practices that you extract from each execution of the cycle flow back up into the global definition, the global set of best practices that you're applying, achieving value all the way along. This really accelerates your true understanding of what it takes to get data analytics work done within your organization. And it has an incredible impact on your ability to achieve ROI, right? By bringing your data and technical expertise and the people who have that expertise together, right? By focusing on building reusable data assets and taking a product management oriented approach, you're going to achieve that ROI. Of course, you could ask yourself, what is the role of AI and ML in this whole flow? And I'm here to tell you that, as you're applying Agile Data Ops, as you're starting to think about something like data cataloging, you should know that we believe this is actually a human supervised machine learning problem. And by bringing human supervised machine learning to bear, right? When you bring in the people with the expertise and you crowdsource that information, you can actually train better models to learn and improve your automation. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be a silver bullet. You need to build that virtuous cycle of your data producers and data consumers working together, capturing knowledge in incremental bits to feed these machine learning models to really realize the value of machine learning data catalogs. And you need a platform that's going to encourage this supervised machine learning model, right? So ultimately, if you adopt this model, how is it going to solve the five problems that we laid out? Well, first of all, it's going to solve your breadline problem because you're going to have a tool and an ecosystem that encourages fast discovery of your data assets. It's going to encourage understanding by enabling you to incrementally add clarity to those data assets. It's going to break down silos by connecting all those data assets together and connecting the people that have the understanding and encouraging them to add knowledge that can be shared rather than it being stuck on one person's desk. Right? By having a collaborative and peer-driven workflow, you're going to arrive at that meeting, you're going to stop that brawl from happening because everybody's going to be involved in the work as it gets done. Everybody's going to be a stakeholder from the get-go rather than having separate teams trying to come up with the same answer. And finally, you're going to democratize the whole process, right? And bring people along for the ride. People learn by doing ultimately. And if you give them an environment where they can really learn by doing, then you're going to unlock the key to truly having a democratized data-driven culture where you have real data literacy. To do that, you got to adopt new tools, right? It isn't just about having the greatest data warehouse or the greatest self-serve BI tool. You got to think about the kind of power tools that are going to enable this kind of agility. And for that, data cataloging can be one of those tools that you want to bring to bear, especially one that will enable you to work in an agile fashion, right? At Data.World, we like to think of data cataloging and a data catalog being an information radiator and collaboration hub for your data analytics ecosystem, right? One that really enables you to work with clarity and accuracy and speed. At the end of the day, it's got to do four things really well, right? Your data catalog needs to make your data assets easy to find, easy to understand, easy to use, and most importantly, easy to reuse. Michelle talked a lot about bringing Agile Data Ops into your environment, right? Well, Agile Data Ops, much like Agile Data Governance, leans a lot on the Agile software development lifecycle and the leaps and bounds improvements we've made in that over the last 20 years. I think one of the most exciting areas of improvement has been in DevOps, this idea of Agile DevOps. And a lot of the core tenets are about having a great ecosystem, adding visibility, enablement, participation, and inclusivity, right? Iteration, observability of the whole ecosystem so you can make fast decisions and respond to your environment. Well, these are really the same core tenets of Agile DevOps as well. And we believe that a great data catalog can be something that gets you there. It needs to be an information radiator that enables the composability that we talked about earlier, where you can plug in additional tools that can add additional metadata about your data analytics operating environment so that people working with the data, whether they be producers or consumers, can understand what the health of that supply chain is at any given moment. At Data.World, we enable that by enabling you to plug in things like data quality or lineage tools, but then also having customizable metadata models so that your participants in your data ecosystem can get the information they need and have them at their fingertips, as quickly as possible, can have that discovery. Of course, an open ecosystem aids in that composability, and we base all of our work on Data.World on open standards, all the way from having open, accessible, and well-documented APIs down to the fact that we are actually built on a semantic knowledge graph, and all the metadata within Data.World is actually built on RDF, the W3C standard for transporting metadata, enabling upstream and downstream systems to collaborate and contribute to your metadata ecosystem in ways that are fast and really, really incredibly composable. Has to be a collaboration hub, right? Has to bring together people from different backgrounds in different ways and really encourage that open, inclusive, and collaborative workflow that encourages peer review. We do that by having an incredible query workbench that actually also includes federation, but also, full social collaboration and the ability to capture knowledge in a crowdsourced manner. Finally, I think it's really important that we add observability to the mix, right? Being able to monitor what's going on so that the people, especially the producers, can react to changes in that environment, right? We add observability in Data.World by making all the data about your data analytics ecosystem available as data to you, right? So anyway, that kind of brings us to the end of our presentation. I want to add some key takeaways here. Talk to even some of the points that Michelle brought up. It was really great to do that and to co-present today. But the first key takeaway that I think we would love everybody walking away with is it's time to learn from the history of the software development lifecycle. That agile processes and adopting agile processes early and now is the time, will really unlock the ROI for you and prevent you from all that top-down value destruction that actually happened in the early 2000s, late 90s in the software industry, right? We have to adopt agile processes now and manage our data like products, apply things like design thinking, another thing that Michelle brought up as well, to the processes that we have, and to bring people together there. We have to think about adding something like a data catalog to create an information radiator for our data analytics, and something that can be a collaboration hub that can capture knowledge in a standardized way using a knowledge graph, but in real time, enabling people to work iteratively and in bite-sized chunks. So it's not a post hoc top-down chore, so that everybody can participate and we can capture this knowledge in as real time as possible to really unlock our data analytics ecosystem and become the kind of organization everybody wants to become, right? At Data.World, we think that we are a great data catalog to help you unlock a lot of that value. We were born in the cloud. We're the only cloud native data catalog available. We get you the innovation as quickly as we can, and we help you reuse what you already have, making everybody smarter, connecting and aligning that ecosystem and people, bringing together the infrastructure and experience really end to end. Right? I want to thank everybody for listening today. It was wonderful to share this time with you. I want to connect. I'm very, very accessible. Please add me. And I'm going to leave us with this final quote from one of our favorite customers at Data.World, Rare, a wonderful nonprofit, focused on ecology, preservation, and conservation. I think this is a great quote about the opportunities that wait for us at the end of this. I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk soon.
Thank you to both of our panelists, to Michelle and to John, for sharing some incredible insights, research, and recommendations. I hope you've all come away from this hour with something that is useful to you, that you can apply back to your own business and data initiatives, and that have given you some really great food for thought. If you have any questions, or if we didn't quite get around to answering your question, feel free to reach out to us. Our team will make sure that your question gets routed to the best person to help, and that you get a response in a timely manner. Otherwise, thank you again for joining us here, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.